gonna start filming myself.
Start a family yourself?
Filming myself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got like 1,000 plus videos out there.
Serious?
Some of them are absolutely silly, like, this is my lemon water. I had one student who didn't know what easy over eggs, over easy? Easy over. I guess it's yeah, so over easy, right? Eggs were, what are those? And so the next time I had some, I videoed what they were, and I posted it so that I could show it to her. In fact, I showed it to her in class, and we all discussed over easy. That's actually kind of cool. You can video any kinds of crap and stick it for free on YouTube, and then whenever you need, like, to recall it, you can do that. The most popular video I've posted, though, was when I filmed my St. Bernard out on the back deck in the snow. And that was when Anchorage broke our record a couple years ago, remember? That was like the day we broke the record. And so I did a short video of her out on the deck in the snow, because she's a St. Bernard, she loves snow. So I, just a short little video, and I posted it, Lady in the Snow on the deck. And some e-magazine shared that link, and I had 33,000 visitors that day to that video.
How do you get, like, can't you get paid for, like, people that come to your page?
No.
You have to have like a partnership with
Yeah, you have to have some kind of a business thing. I'm not interested in that, because
Plus, I don't think it starts until after 50,000, and you get like 1 cent per 1,000 visitors or something.
Yeah,
it's not, you don't get paid for like people who view it. You get paid by like the ads.
Yeah.
That post.
definitely you can make money over the internet. I've made
Like if you click
thousands of
on it,
dollars using the internet,
Well, tell me
mostly
how.
by doing jobs like in New York, mostly editing jobs that I get paid for doing. So yeah, you could use the internet as a way of having work throughout the world, as long as you're connected. You don't have to live in New York City to do that. You know, you can live here and just do stuff. That's true. It is work, though. I mean, you actually have to like do stuff. I spent a lot of time making that money. 'Cause I edited a logic book for publication for cooking. It was $2,000 that they paid me, but it's neat when you have that kind of upfront cash for your effort. You're not dependent on the book actually selling, which was good because the book was crap, basically. And so it sold like one edition, and then they changed the edition. So if I had like royalties or something associated with the book, I wouldn't have made any money, probably. But because I got paid for doing the editing work. By the way, it wasn't my fault that the book was crap, because in between, like, when I sent the files and when it actually got into the book, you could see all these mistakes that came in that weren't in what I had. So there was a moving from the file to the book, somehow all these errors entered into the book, which was kind of annoying. But I had loads of fun jokes from Alaska as examples and stuff, so that was kind of neat. I used it once in class, and then that was the end of it. Was cool on this one. I got paid for doing some work on this book, by the way. Notice I even got a little blurb on the back. So there are, and by the way, people email me and ask me to do it. So it's not like I know how to go and find these jobs. It's just when people email me and offer stuff, I say yes. If they send me like, oh, you have a chance to win a $100 gift certificate if you do this, I say, no. Because that's just like, you're not going to get anything for it, right? Which is pretty obvious. So the quiz question was, page 298, yes. And I had 4 problems, problem 12, 13, 14, and 15. There was something wrong with 3 of them, but the 4th one,
Oh my God.
number 14, is actually perfectly fine. K and P or not Q. That's a well-formed formula, no problem. Right? So, yeah, not an issue. The rule that you have to have the operator in between left and right, basically, is followed, and here it's followed, and the negation has to be in front of whatever it negates, and that's true. Notice with 12, you had R or T, which is fine, but then you had a negation sign in front of nothing. So that breaks the rule. Right? 13, you have PQ, which is, no, that doesn't make any sense because it's like, well, P, what? Q? P and Q? P or Q? P and not Q, you know, right? What? And so it's missing. So that's not a well-formed formula. And the last one, L, not P. Again, there's no connector. The negation sign just negates P, but it doesn't have a connector between these two. So, but this one is perfectly fine. Doesn't break the rule. So fine. So the main operator we're concerned about. What is the main operator? If I have, this is on page 298, so if I have not the case R, there is an operator there, even though I'm not connecting 2 statements. And the reason for that is because we've chosen to call the negation as a logical operator. And in many respects, it absolutely is, right? And you have to figure out the truth function of that logical operator. So if I have R, the truth function of that is true if R is true. But if I have not the case R, and R is true, then the truth function of that is false. So the operator changes the truth function of a statement. Okay. Now in number 2, right after that, in the book, middle of the page, 298, I have not the case P or Q. So in this compound statement, there is one operator here, P or Q. Either P is true or Q is true, or both, right? P or Q are true. Right? But then notice that the main operator in this whole thing is here, because you're negating the whole statement, right? So it's not the case that P or Q are true. What would that mean, by the way? It's not the case that P or Q are true. Would that imply P and Q are both false, right? So if this is true, it must be the case that it's not the case P and not the case Q. Right? In fact, that turns out to be a rule. So if you go to your back of your handy-dandy book and you look at your rules, which are on this far left side when you open it this way, right? Notice that you have, under replacement rules, you have the first set on the top left. It's called De Morgan's, right? And if we look at the 4 possibilities there, notice the way you read those, the top left under De Morgan's, not P and Q, is equivalent to not the case P or not the case Q. And under that, it says not the case P or Q, which is what we have here, is equivalent to not the case P and not the case Q, right? So that's kind of a nice rule to have. It's named De Morgan's theorems because De Morgan is the one that discovered how well that worked, right? So that's probably the case that people have used that rule successfully for thousands of years, but De Morgan gets the credit for it because he's the one that defines it, right? But it's kind of important to think about this one, and even though I have this line written in reverse from the second one that you have here, right? Oh, no, I haven't written it. The top one, in fact, I should put it at the top. So not the case P and Q is logically equivalent. In other words, you could put it in any statement you make, or you use this statement, you can change it, the form, and make it not the case P or not the case Q, right? So now, as you noticed, right, this means you can have both of them, right? If I say it's not the case P and Q, that means you could possibly have one or the other. You just can't have both, right? So not P and Q could mean that I have P, I just don't have Q, so I don't have P and Q, right? Or I could have Q, but I don't have P, so I don't have P and Q, right? So not the case P and Q is equivalent to not the case P or not the case Q. Whereas, remember with this one, if I say it's not the case P or Q, that's equivalent to saying I don't have P and I don't have Q. And by the way, vice versa. So if I don't have P and I don't have Q, that's equivalent to saying I don't have P or Q, right? In everyday speech, right? And same thing with this. If I say it's not the case P or not the case Q, I'm saying it's not the case that I have P and Q. Right? So these are good equivalences, right? So you could use those in any situation where you're expressing something in English with one or the other. You can equally substitute the other with no change in logical structure, right? So it's true. If it's true what you say in this case, and then you revise it to this, you haven't changed the truth value at all, right? And by the way, we can prove that, and we might even show that today. So that's De Morgan. So that's kind of a handy thing, right? By the way, in these situations, this is the main logical operator in this, right? This is the main logical operator in this. But then if I look at the whole statement, this is the main logical operator in the whole thing. Right? Same thing here. In this particular situation, this is the main logical operator for this portion. Right? This is the main logical operator in this one. And of course, this and this. Right? So figuring out how to parse the grammar of this system, right, is what we're looking at. Number 3, we have a foot-long, compound statement. Again, I have to. I always think of the IRS whenever we see anything that's that long, right? Number 3, we have a negation sign out in front of a bracket that includes the whole statement. It has. So how do we read that? It's not the case, and this is the main operator for the whole statement, right? It's not the case that either P or Q and R and S, right? So this is the main operator, but then this is the next one in, and then each side has a main operator. Right? So P or Q, that's a compound statement all by itself. So is this, right? But then they're conjoined, and then they're negated, right? So that's how you. Is anybody having trouble with this, or should we move on? I don't want to bore you to death if it's like, well, duh, right? We can move on faster. But if you feel like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on?
I always feel like what's going on.
You feel like you know what's going on?
No, I said I always feel like, hey, what's going on? I think I've been
You
walking
always
around,
feel like that?
Yeah, I think I've been walking around life with the wrong logic my whole life.
That could be. People
Yeah.
do that, actually. I've met people like that. Most of them are from Samoa. That's politically incorrect, right? But just on the data, actually, my own personal experience, most of the people I've discovered who really have trouble with logic are in their mind, they're speaking Samoan.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they speak English, they're kind of speaking English with a Samoan perspective. And they apparently cannot do Aristotelian logic, which is interesting to me from a linguistic standpoint. You know, how does the language impact that? And I think I mentioned I had the one Chinese professor who was just here again recently, by the way, talking about robotics. But the last time he was here, he talked about speaking Chinese does not enable a person to do Western logic, right? So remember my question is, how do they even have true and false statements? I don't get it. Maybe one of you will go on and do your PhD and figure out, you know, how that works. That would be really, I would read your thesis. That would be great. So the main operator. Okay, so let me ask you a couple others. What is the main operator on page 300 in problem 2? Somebody just yell it out. See how they circled the first example? They have not the case Q or P, and the wedge, the or, is the main operator. Well, what would be the main operator in number 2?
It is not the case, right?
No, the dot.
The dots.
So for example, let's try though. Here we go.
The and.
Here's number
and more
2,
over.
right? R, N, and inside parentheses now we have not the case T or K, right? So how would we read this? R and either not the case T or K. Right? So the main operator here in this whole compound statement is this one, because I have this and this. Basically, if I wanted, I could just use like a variable to say I have a P and Q statement, where Q is not the case T or K, right? So the main operator here is the conjunction, right? But then if I'm looking at, well, the conjunction is the left and the right. Well, the right is a compound statement on its own. And how we know that, by the way, is the parentheses. Notice if I had that. That's still a well-formed formula, but now the way it reads is either R and not T or K, which is very different than what I had there before, right? Notice, just like in math though, if what I was saying is either R or not T or K, right? I could actually move these parentheses without changing the logical meaning of the whole statement. Just as in math, where like if I have one, or let's make it harder. 3 plus 5 plus 7, right? I could move the parentheses without changing the meaning of this computation, right? The result would be the same. But notice if that was different, right? Any of those, then I wouldn't be able to move the parentheses because it would change the function, the truth function of the formula, right? Remember, each of these capital letters stand for an actual statement that's just making it a lot shorter to write. And those statements are either A, E, I, O statements that are true or false, right? Preferably true. You should, I guess, imagine people generally will not say things that they realize are false. We assume that when people say something, that they believe that what they said was true, right? Unless they're your children. Did you clean your room? Yes, Mom. You know that's false, right? And it's just totally. Okay. So how about another one? Number 3 is easy, right? There's only one operator in number 3, not the case K, so the main operator has to be the only operator, which would be the negations. Let's look at a more confusing one.
Number 17.
I was going to try number 8.
Oh, number 8.
Number 8, P or
Is it the dot again?
Q then R. Exactly. And the dot. And then not the case R or S.
Hello.
So this is a well-formed formula. Basically, the main operator is right here, right? So this and this, right? And if I'm looking at it, how do I read the part on the left? Well, it says either P or, if Q then R, and either not the case R or S. Right? So the main operator is right here. 17. Do 17.
Mm-hmm.
So I have brackets, parentheses, M or P, then what? Yeah, 17, right? Then Q or R. Okay, so the main operator in this whole statement, compound statement, is
The wedge.
the or, right here, right? See how it works? What do we have on the left side? The whole bracket, this whole bracket thing, right? And notice, so now I've got to parse this out because now inside of this bracket, that's my main operator because it says if this, then this, or so if P, then Q, right? But P, the antecedent of this conditional, is a compound statement already, so I have M or P, right? And then the consequent of this conditional is either Q or R, right? Or S and not P. So the whole thing would read either if either M or P, then either Q or R, or S and not P. That would be how that whole thing would read, right? Now, notice this is good shorthand for figuring out really complex statements. In fact, it could even come in handy in figuring out that the complex statement is miswritten, right? Because if in translating it correctly you end up with a statement that's not a well-formed formula, then there's something wrong with the statement that the person wrote, right? Which certainly can happen. If you've ever read a paragraph and you were like, huh? What was that person saying, right? Then what you're in a sense doing is there's something grammatically incorrect there, right? So you have to figure out what it is. Okay. Now, translating into this system. This system was developed as a way of doing a couple of things. One, making our ideas more clear, so that when you're looking at complex everyday speech paragraphs or speeches or IRS directions, right? It's mind-boggling sometimes in its complexity, right? By abbreviating it into this system, we can simplify it so you can see it much easier than you would, say, in the native language, right? The other thing that it enables us to do is to turn it into a less ambiguous statement, a less ambiguous message, right, or speech, right? Because that complexity not only sometimes is harder to parse, but it also confuses us because of that, right? So by putting it into these simple or simpler, it might not feel like, well, that's not very simple, but of course the statement that this is a translation of would be way more complex looking, right? So this is actually simplifying things for us so that it's easier to see what's going on logically, right? So it's very nice to do that. But in doing these translations, then, we're removing ambiguity from the language so that it becomes more. So sometimes what happens is the speech is ambiguous enough that you don't know what translation is the correct translation. So here it's pretty clear. I'm saying either all of this or this. But I can imagine someone uttering this in such a confusing way that you're not sure. Maybe the main operator should be over here. Maybe this is what they were saying. It's a totally different thing, right? But it could be the way they were saying it that you got the impression, so you're saying if M or P, then either Q or R or S and not P. Is that what you meant? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. They could have been so confused that what were they actually saying? So in translating from everyday speech to the symbol system, you're removing a certain amount of ambiguity that's potentially there in the everyday speech, right? And by the way, some people mean for that ambiguity to be there. So that when you're clarifying it like this, whoa, I didn't realize I was being so confusing. Yeah, why are you being so confusing? Because I'm confused, right? So this process actually can unconfuse the thinking that's in process, right, between us, right? What did you mean? Exactly. So translations. So when we translate sentences from ordinary language, we must try our best to use logical operators to reduce or eliminate ambiguity. Right? Try to figure out what's going on. So obviously this isn't very poetic. Notice, no rhyming, Twas Brillig and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the way. What? So Brillig and slithy toes. So if it's a slithy toe, then it gyres and whatever in the way, you know, so, you know, okay, now I know. I don't know what you're talking about, but at least I know the arrangement of your nouns and verbs and so. Was that funny? Good joke. Keep your mom wraths to yourself, please. What's a mom wrath? No clue what a mom wrath is.
A mom rap?
Mom wrath.
What is it?
Remember the Jabberwock? I did the Jabberwock for the class, right? Did you ever go home and figure out what all that stuff is? Okay. So, for example, page 301, either Tracy or Becky owns a DVD player, but Sophie owns one for sure. So what am I saying? Either Tracy or Becky owns one. Dot. Because for sure, what's her face? Sophie. Sophie owns one, right? So for me to be right, one or the other of these must have a DVD player, but I also must have, Sophie must have one, right? So the word but indicates that the main operator is a conjunction. To the left of the comma, the statement either Tracy or Becky owns a DVD player is a disjunction, etc. So T or B and S, right? But not both Suzuki and Honda are Japanese-owned companies. Not both. Not both. Right? It is not the case that either Ford or Chevrolet is a Japanese-owned company. Not the case. Ford or Chevrolet. Right. So truth functions. So defining the 5 logical operators. How do we define them? Did I draw truth tables for you yet? I don't think so. I can do this. Have it in the book as well. That's table 2. The first one we have in our book is negation, which is, let's see if we can just get. These are actually the same thing, they're just using a different font for the, so it's not this one. Okay, so this is conjunction, that's okay. Notice they're using the, what is that called, the ampersand sign, right, instead of a dot, right? But it's functioning the same as a dot. So notice, so if I'm looking at this, I have P and Q, which represent their variables that represent any statement that's true or false, so it's a truth functional statement, it's either true or false, right? And I'm saying that, so in any conjunction where I'm saying both P and Q, right? P and Q, right? Then where both P and Q are true, the whole statement is true, but in all other circumstances, the whole statement is false, right? Which is exactly what you mean when you say two statements, and you can join them, right? It's sunny but cold. It's actually not cold, right? Well, it would be cold if you were from Hawaii, right? I've lived in Hawaii, unfortunately, for 3 whole years. What a sufferance, right? And believe it or not, people got cold in Hawaii. It was hilarious. I mean, you know, it was the time of the year when it was the most comfortable for me. And I'm like, finally, it's cooled off enough that I feel comfortable. And all these people would come out of their homes with heavy jackets and stuff because they were freezing. It was just crazy. So if you're Hawaiian and you're outside today, you would say, oh, it's beautiful but cold. That's true for that person. Right? But what are they doing? They're saying it's beautiful, so that statement has to be true, and it's cold, that statement has to be true. So, like, this is like the dough of Homer, right? Oh, right, ouch, I shouldn't do that. It's my prefrontal cortex, I don't want to hurt it. Once when I was a kid and we were playing football, I was at the bottom of the pile-up, and the pile-up just kept wrestling, and it kept moving towards this pole on the cyclone fence, and bang! I banged my head right into it, and I had a lump the size of an egg on my head, and came home. Ah! You know how you do when you're a kid. And Mom was like, oh, what did you do? You know, ice packs. So P and Q. So or, notice the difference with or. Now we have the same truth table, by the way, for P and Q, because if you have two statements, each of which can be either true or false, you're going to have 4 logical possibilities. The possibility where both are true, where both are false, and in between, right? So if I'm looking at the wedge operator, the or statement, right? Notice it's defined as true when both are true. Remember this because it's the inclusive use of or. So you can have both apple pie and peach pie, right? Not one or the other, right? And then you can have, well, it's still true as long as one or the other is true, right? It's only false if it turns out that you're wrong about both, right? Then you're wrong. So you can have peach pie or apple pie. Oh, great. You go up and you look, where's the apple pie? Where's the peach pie? Oh, they're all gone. What? But Dad said. Oh, you'll just have to have some pancreatic pie instead. It's pancreatic pie. That sounds terrible. I saw a YouTube video, I don't know why, it just showed up on my screen, but it was a guy who was so upset by something he smelled that he kept almost puking every time he thought about it. And so his wife kept asking him, and so, what did it smell like? And he was like, oh, no. She said, so did it smell like pee or what? You know. She kept doing that until he actually threw up. You know, it was what a horrible video. Wives aren't really like that, are they?
Yep.
I've only had one
I mean,
wife,
I don't know.
so I don't know if wives are like, you know, wives is
I don't even
plural.
know.
If this, then that. Well, I would just say if, then, but. So how do we do that? We have now, in this font, notice they use the arrow, the little arrow. We use the horseshoe in our book instead of this, right? But so P and Q, left and right side, right? Well, so now in this case, notice, if both statements are true, the whole statement's true. The only situation where it would be false is if the antecedent, the side on the left, is true, but the side on the right is false. Right? That's the situation where I said, you know, so if, you know, I said to Christopher, if you take out the trash, I'll give you a quarter. He took out the trash, and then he comes back for his quarter, and I said, not gonna give you one. That's the false, right? That's when that relationship is false. Oddly, you know, even if he didn't take out the trash, as long as I gave him the quarter, he wouldn't have any grounds for complaining. You know, theoretically, you might say, Dad, I didn't take out the trash. You don't need to give me a quarter. That's all right. Out of the kindness of my heart and the fact that this quarter is burning a hole in my pocket, I'm going to give it to you, right? Actually, that's a totally miserable example. Now what I should do is say, you know, my daughter says, Dad, I need $1,000 for rent. Well, if you pet the dog, I'll give you $1,000. And she pets the dog. Okay, so then I give her $1,000. Right? I should, instead of a quarter for emptying the trash, you said it was $15 to empty the trash?
20.
20? 20 to empty the trash.
Oh, that's the going rate.
Not in my house.
Not in my house. It's an obligation. If you're going to eat here, you have to empty the trash.
That's right.
Look, I think there should be like
Minimum
unions.
wage for in the house.
Yeah,
Well,
there
the
should be
state's
unions
raising
for
it to
kids.
15 in some places, right? You know, so
I think my mom's just supposed to charging me for the bags I
she
use. So
charges you for the bags.
She might sue
Yes,
her.
I can see
I
that.
use a lot.
After all, the bags are expensive. Okay, so here's the not, right? And so not, you can, of course, arrange these however you want. In our book, we have them arranged by negation first, page 305, conjunction second, disjunction third, conditional, and then the biconditional, right? So, but you get the idea. These are universally used, so if you're going to use a computer, you need to know these, right? Because that's the way your computer works. So, okay, that's good. So let's.
Trump. The Donald. Dude, he won Mississippi. I thought Casey was
So just as kind of a, breaking the boringness of the situation, I thought I'd share this with you, and maybe we could analyze it. Why not? That's the goal of this, right? Is so that we can be more clear in our thinking, right? So here's an article that, is this today's? I forget. I just read it today. I don't know where it's.
I wonder if this was the beginning of the end of the
So let us now address the greatest American mystery at the moment. What motivates the supporters of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump? By the way, I think this is a good article. That's why I'm sharing it. Today's the 9th. What was this?
7.
It says on there somewhere?
Yeah.
7. Okay, so it's 2 days ago. I call it a mystery because the working class white people who make up the bulk of Trump's fan base show up in amazing numbers for the candidate, filling stadiums and airport hangars, but their views by and large do not appear in our prestige newspapers. On their opinion pages, these publications take care to represent demographic categories of nearly every kind, but blue collar is one they persistently overlook. And most of us are blue collar by this definition, right? Most of us, especially here in Alaska, I think, right? That's why I think Trump and Cruz came very close, but Cruz just barely eked a win in
Idaho.
in Alaska.
Right, Alaska.
Okay, but so the blue collar is one they persistently overlook. The views of working class people are so foreign to that universe that when New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof wanted to engage a Trump supporter last week, he made one up. Invented one, because he didn't actually know anyone that was in that class, right? along with this imaginary person's responses to his questions. When members of the professional class wish to understand the working class other, so he's capitalized that as an individual, right? That abstract other. They traditionally consult experts on the subject. Experts on the other, right? And when these authorities are asked to explain the Trump movement, they always seem to zero in on one main accusation: bigotry. Only racism, they tell us, is capable of powering a movement like Trump's, which is blowing through the inherited structure of the Republican Party like a tornado through a cluster of McMansions. Ooh, I love that expression. You want a McMansion of your own? It would be fun. No.
What is a McMahon?
A really big house.
Oh, a McMahon. All right.
Trump himself provides rather excellent evidence for this finding. The man is an insult clown who has systematically gone down the list of American ethnic groups and offended them each in turn. He wants to deport millions upon millions of undocumented immigrants. He wants to bar Muslims from visiting the United States. He admires various foreign strongmen and dictators and has even retweeted a quote from Mussolini. This gold-plated buffoon. Now, by the way, let me ask this up front.
Gold-plated before.
And this was true of George Bush, W., right? Also, by the way, he put on an act, right? He was actually a very well-educated member of the elite, a graduate of Harvard Business School, etc., right? Always wealthy and so on, but he learned to talk like he was from Texas so that he could get elected, right? Sparky went in there after that, porcupine, right? And in fact, if you saw the movie W, at one point he's sitting at a bar with a friend from Harvard, right? And the friend looks at him and says, "Why do you talk like that? You don't talk like that." And he explained that his very first election in Texas, he was out Texaned, right? So he learned his lesson. You have to act a certain way for the voters to vote for you, right? And so he did, and he kept that up, and obviously won, right? Twice, right, as president, right? You think Trump is doing the same thing? He's a billionaire, educated, went to Wharton School of Business.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it so much. Like, he's went too far. Like, you could do it to some point. Okay.
How do you measure that, though? Because he's winning.
Yeah, he's winning, but like you said, that's in the Republican Party. When you put him up against the rest of them,
right. Well, he's not
even
running
enough
for the Democrats right now.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the people
He's going to change his act once he's trying to.
He can't.
Sure, he can.
No.
I think he can.
A leper can't change his spots. You can't pee down the
Well,
back and tell me
see,
it's
what
raining
you're
outside.
saying is he is a racist. He's a buffoon.
No,
says
I'm
this guy,
saying
right?
he really thinks what he's saying.
Well, he was a Democrat like 5 years ago.
What
Like,
if he's just fooling this guy into thinking he's this insult buffoon?
But
Think
at
about
some
how easy
point,
that would be to do.
some point, you gotta lay back. Like, okay, I've made it this far. I'm gaining traction. I'm really winning. So
Okay.
now I can stop it. I can stop the
Well,
act.
let's watch how he behaves, because
Oh, he ain't gonna stop.
we have
Last night he said everybody they're losers. Yeah, it's over. He ain't gonna stop.
his supporters all loved it, right?
Yeah, but he ain't gonna stop.
Right. So, if you were trying to win the Republican primaries, you would behave exactly the way the others are all competing with him to try to behave the same way, and guess what? He's out behaving the others.
And that's why none of them gonna get it. You want a man of principle and moral, man. You can't have nobody.
So here we
who
go.
willing
So he wants to
compromise.
deport. Okay. So he admires various foreign strongmen and dictators, and has even retweeted a quote from Mussolini. By the way, what's wrong with that?
This gold-plated buffoon.
No,
I think that's awesome.
What's wrong with admiring various foreign strongmen and dictators?
Nothing really.
That means he's really kind of broad-minded, actually.
It's some things, I mean, there are
This
some brilliant
gold-plated
things in
buffoon
it.
has in turn drawn the enthusiastic endorsement of leading racists from across the spectrum of intolerance, a gorgeous mosaic of haters, each of them quivering excitedly at the prospect of getting a real honest-to-God bigot in the White House. All this stuff is so insane, so wildly outrageous that the commentariat, which is a fake word, right? It's a fake word, has deemed it to be the entirety of the Trump campaign. Trump appears to be racist, so racism must be what motivates his armies of followers. And so on Saturday, New York Times columnist Timothy Egan blamed none other than the people for Trump's racism. Donald Trump's supporters know exactly what he stands for: hatred of immigrants, racial superiority, a sneering disregard of the basic civility that binds a society. Stories marveling at the stupidity of Trump voters are published nearly every day. Articles that accuse Trump's followers of being bigots have appeared by the hundreds, if not the thousands. Conservatives have written them, liberals have written them, impartial professionals have written them. The headline of a recent Huffington Post column announced bluntly that Trump won Super Tuesday because America is racist. By the way, I would argue that America is one of the least racist countries in the world, personally. I've been to places that are far worse, where you'd be shot just for showing up, basically. So that's kind of interesting, right? We get along better, actually. We follow rule of law better. Does that mean it's perfect? Absolutely not. But, so where are we here? A New York Times reporter proved that Trump's followers were bigots by coordinating a map of Trump's support with a map of racist Google searches. Everyone knows it. Trump's followers' passions are nothing more than the ignorant blurtings of the white American ID, driven to madness by the presence of a black man in the White House. The Trump movement is a one-note phenomenon, a vast surge of race hate. Its partisans are not only incomprehensible, they are not really worth comprehending. Or, so we're told. So here's the point that he's going to make. That's all wrong. Last week, I decided to watch several hours of Trump's speeches for myself. I saw the man ramble and boast and threaten and even seem to gloat when protesters were ejected from the arenas in which he spoke. I was disgusted by these things, as I have been disgusted by Trump for 20 years. But I also noticed something surprising. In each of the speeches I watched, Trump spent a good part of his time talking about an entirely legitimate issue, one that could even be called left-wing. Yes, Donald Trump talked about trade. In fact, to judge by how much time he spent talking about it, trade may be his single biggest concern. Not white supremacy, not even his plan to build a wall along the Mexican border, the issue that first won him political fame. He did it again during the debate on 3 March. Asked about his political excommunication by Mitt Romney, he chose to pivot and talk about trade. It seems to obsess him, the destructive free trade deals our leaders have made. So NAFTA, etc., right? Remember when when a lot of people, Perot, you remember Ross Perot arguing that if we pass NAFTA, that we're going to hear this large sucking sound of all the jobs leaving the United States, right? Guess what? It's absolutely happened. Right? Absolutely. Right? So the destructive free trade deals our leaders have made, the many companies that have moved their production facilities to other lands, the phone calls he will make to those companies, CEOs, in order to threaten them with steep tariffs unless they move back to the U.S. I mean, can he actually do this? That's kind of very interesting to me and the group that I discuss these things with. Trump embellished this vision with another favorite left-wing idea. Under his leadership, the government would start competitive bidding in the drug industry. We don't competitively bid, he marveled. Another true fact, a legendary boondoggle brought to you by the George W. Bush administration. It's true, right? Why are medicine prices in the U.S. so high that a lot of people around the border of Canada get their medicines from Canada, etc., right? You buy the same drugs anywhere else for a lot cheaper than in the United States, right? we're not allowed to competitively bid. So Medicare, the government programs, all those have to pay top dollar for them, right, et cetera. Trump extended the critique to the military-industrial complex, describing how the government is forced to buy lousy but expensive airplanes thanks to the power of industry lobbyists. Also true, right? Thus did he hint at his curious selling proposition. Because he is personally so wealthy, a fact about which he loves to boast, Trump himself is unaffected by business lobbyists and donations, and because he is free from the corrupting power of modern campaign finance, famous deal maker Trump can make deals on our behalf that are good instead of bad. The chance that he will actually do so, of course, is small. Now, that's an interesting opinion. I don't know. Who says? He appears to be a hypocrite on this issue as well as so many other things, but at least Trump is saying this stuff. All this surprised me because for all the articles about Trump I had read in recent months, I didn't recall trade coming up very often. Trump is supposed to be on a one-note crusade for whiteness, says the press. Could it be that all this trade stuff is a key to understanding the Trump phenomenon? Trade is an issue that polarizes Americans by socioeconomic status. To the professional class, which encompasses the vast majority of our media figures, economists, Washington officials, and Democratic power brokers, what they call free trade is something so obviously good and noble, it doesn't require explanation or inquiry or even thought. Republican and Democratic leaders alike agree on this, and no amount of facts can move them from their Econ 101 dream. To the remaining 80 or 90% of America, trade means something very different. There's a video going around on the internet these days that shows a room full of workers at a Carrier air conditioning plant in Indiana being told by an officer of the company that the factory is being moved to Monterrey, Mexico, and that they're all going to lose their jobs. As I watched it, I thought of all the arguments over trade that we've had in this country since the early 1990s, all the sweet words from our economists about the scientifically proven benevolence of free trade, all the ways in which our newspapers mock people say that treaties like the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement allow companies to move jobs to Mexico. Well, here is a video of a company moving its jobs to Mexico, courtesy of NAFTA, right? This is what it looks like. The Carrier executive talks in that familiar and highly professional HR human relations language, right, about the need to stay competitive and the extremely price-sensitive marketplace. A worker shouts, "Fuck you," at the executive. The executive asks people to please be quiet so he can share his information about all of them losing their jobs. Now I have no special reason to doubt the suspicion that Donald Trump is a racist. Could very well be. By the way, all three of his wives have not been Caucasians, is that right? Not strictly speaking.
She's German, but she's
So she would be,
I mean, she's
got
white.
them all, I think all of them
But
said
they're
they're
not
Asian.
from America.
They've just
Okay.
They've all been
been
foreign.
foreign.
I'm confused about what
American
white is
citizens.
anyway, because
She's just
I'm not
Germanic.
sure.
She's Germanic, not Caucasian.
Yeah,
I
she
know I'm
has-
supposed to be Caucasian, but
she
I've
has
never been
German
to the
blood, so
Caucasus
she's not
Mountains.
German.
I've never even met anyone from the Caucasus Mountains, so,
He's like
and two of my kids are black. How did that
Most
happen?
of us are.
Oh, well, of course, we adopted, but hey, you know,
Still, technically speaking, most people aren't really actually Caucasian. They should be Germanic.
in fact, now I know for sure that I'm part Neanderthal. Because I'm supposedly Caucasian, and we now know that that's where the Caucasian characteristic came from, the Neanderthals. So if you're Caucasian, it's roughly the Neanderthal genes that you still have. It explains that. Which also explains why the Neanderthals went out of business. Sorry. Okay, so, but there's another way to interpret the Trump phenomena. A map of his support may coordinate with racist Google searches, but it coordinates even better with deindustrialization and despair. With the zones of economic misery that 30 years of Washington free market consensus have brought the rest of America. It is worth noting that Trump is making a point of assailing that Indiana air conditioning company from the video in his speeches, what this suggests is that he's telling a tale as much about economic outrage as it is a tale of racism on the march. Many of Trump's followers are bigots, no doubt, but many more are probably excited by the prospect of a president who seems to mean it when he denounces our trade agreements and promises to bring the hammer down on the CEO that fired you and wrecked your town, unlike Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Here is the most salient supporting fact. When people talk to white working-class Trump supporters, instead of simply imagining what they might say, they find that what most concerns these people is the economy and their place in it. I am referring to a study just published by Working America, a political action auxiliary of the AFL-CIO, which interviewed some 1,600 white working-class voters in the suburbs of Cleveland and Pittsburgh in December and January. Support for Donald Trump, the group found, ran strong among these people, even among self-identified Democrats. But not because they are all pining for a racist in the White House. Their favorite aspect of Trump was his attitude, the blunt and forthright way he talks. As far as issues are concerned, immigration placed third among the matters such voters care about, far behind their number one concern, good jobs, the economy, etc. So basically, he's critiquing the liberal media for focusing on a particular aspect of Donald Trump that is there, but misleading, because that's not what he discovers is the real key to Trump's popularity, right? Of course, the question is, if he's saying that what he's going to do is change the economy by stopping all the companies from moving their jobs out of the country, right, or charging tariffs, that's actually illegal according to NAFTA. He would have to somehow get NAFTA out in order to do that, right? So that's the interesting question. Will he be able to do that stuff? And his arguments, as far as I can tell, is basically that he knows how to make a deal. Trust him. He knows how to make a deal. Interesting. So that's pretty interesting. Does that stir the blood? Do you have blood? Yes, you do. You have to have blood. Otherwise you're dead. Right? So how about a good quiz question today would be, what do you think of that argument? Trump won 3 more states last night. Did you notice?
Yep.
He won Michigan, Mississippi,
Hawaii. I thought they was going Kasich, because that's where I'm from, and they very conservative down there. So I was shocked.
Cruz won Idaho. And it's interesting, if you're watching the Democrats, Hillary won Mississippi, but Bernie won Michigan. So that's kind of interesting too. So this is fascinating stuff.
I just know it's great television. I don't have to turn to a reality show. I just turn it to.
It is a reality show.
It's the best reality show I've seen in a long time.
So you guys have to suffer with a whole week off. You realize that? No logic for a whole week? How are you going to survive? You know what I might do? I might actually post quiz questions for Monday and Wednesday to see if all of the people that routinely don't come to class but send me their responses don't realize that you didn't actually have class. Would that be mean and rotten?
No, it's an experiment.
It's an experiment, yes.
It'll never mean if you're not putting points.
And when is Easter this year? April?
March 27th.
March.
March 27th.
March
Easter.
27th.
Sunday.
So that reminds me of, how many of you are fans of Philip Glass?
Philippe Glass.
cans of Philip
And
Glass.
he said, if he'd have told me why didn't he get on his knees.
So Philip Glass is a composer, a living composer. This is Akhenaten, one of his triad of operas, one Satyarjuga, or however you say it, about Gandhi, and I forget what the first one is. This one is Akhenaten. That's Akhenaten. One of my heroes, actually. And Nefertiti is right here. I have a copy of Nefertiti's bust in my office, by the way, which is kind of cool. And that's, I think, his mother. Amenhotep's wife. Amenhotep, of course, is dead at this point. But here's the interesting place. So notice what he's going to do. Akhenaten is the one who destroys the pagan gods of Egypt. As you just saw, really. Did he actually physically himself destroy statues? I know he had his forces destroy them, but I don't know if he actually physically did that. Especially in front of the priest. This is the priest who's all upset, of course. Animal gods and idolatry are no longer to be tolerated. Instead, belief in monotheism, right? So this is the official, universal, worldwide, whatever you want to call it, invention for development of monotheism for the first time. Didn't last very long, by the way, because the priests rebelled and killed him and put his son Tutankhamun on the throne. Right, that's famous. King Tut, right? King Tut, you know how they walk. Right? And then the monotheists fled north to get away from being killed. And by the way, Moses was their leader. They were called the Hebrews, and they founded Israel. It's kind of interesting. So when we think about Easter, we could also think about what is Easter? The sun returning, right? Pretty obvious.
It doesn't look stable.
Well, have a good spring break.
Well, back then,
I don't really feel like it's that springy yet, do we? How many of you have flowers growing already? Nobody.
all right.
And the kid comes out of nowhere and he like jumps up on the seat in front of him.
Oh, I guess we'll figure it out then. We should be done test 3, right? When do we do test 3? Double check.
It's like, I'll really only be like.
Because you could either do it before or after if there's a conflict.
I could.
It's the good. Test 3 will be the same as the one we just did, test
Okay.
2, and test 4, which would be the end of April, would be another one like the first test. Where you just send me essays. You sent me your essays. You did, right? Or did you not?
I sent it to you, and then you emailed me saying you didn't get it, so I just emailed it to you again today.
Okay. Okay. Good.
I can work from home for that week. It's only gonna be those first 2 days where I won't be able to do anything, but I just won't be able to come to school those days because all
So
it
you said April 12th. Okay. So test 3 is scheduled for March 3rd.
Oh, okay, so like,
And the rest of these chapters that we now, we might actually extend this a little bit into like maybe April 4th or 6th.
Okay.
Because if people are having trouble with it, we can bump into these chapters. Because these chapters are really untestable. I mean, the way I do it, so everyone just does essays
Okay.
on these. So that will be fine. I don't think we do have a final posted. Let me see.
Yeah, you said we're gonna watch a movie in class.
For the final session.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
but for the final test.
Yeah, I don't think you have one on there.
Yeah, I have to update this. I don't know if this still works. Does it? It does. Oh, it does. Ooh, maybe I don't have to do it. I'm lazy. So that's cool. So maybe I don't have to do it. So it'll work.
Okay.
It will work. You shall survive. Do we need to pray for you while you're under?
I should be
Surgery?
okay.
Jeremy, I'm pointing to where he usually sits, is having a baby today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you didn't even notice he was pregnant.
I know girls who are named Jeremy.
Well, he,
Oh, I didn't.
he's having a baby,
Oh.
which is really unusual for a guy. Actually, it's his wife.
Oh.
They thought she was going to give birth on Friday, but there was a shortage of staff, so they put it off till today.
Okay.
Is that how that works? I didn't know you could do that.
I've never been pregnant, so.
I,
Thank you.
I did warn him, not to have any Doritos nearby.
Okay.
You saw the commercial, the Super Bowl commercial.
I don't know if I did.
The woman's having a ultrasound,
Oh,
and they're looking
yeah.
at the baby, and the husband's standing there eating Doritos, and she says, "Really, you're eating Doritos at my ultrasound?" And he's like this, and he notices as he holds the chip that the kid in the ultrasound is like going, reaching for the chip, and he goes, and the child's reaching for it. And he goes like this, and he goes, and she says, "Ow, give me that!" And she takes the chip and she throws it towards her feet, and all of a sudden the baby goes, whoosh, and they go, "Ah!" That's how the commercial went.
Okay.
So I told him, keep the Doritos away, because you don't want the child suddenly.
That's sound advice.
Pardon?
So that's sound advice.
Yes, you don't want. Well, I'll see you after the break. Be
Thanks.
safe. Don't ski into an avalanche zone.
Okay.
And things like a lot of Alaskan teenagers love to do,
Okay.
go out and try to kill themselves while they're on spring break.